Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my February wrap-up. This month it will not be a wrap-up on the go type video like in January because I only read 3 books in February and I finished all of them over the past couple of days. So I'm just doing it all in one go this month. In March I'll be participating in a readathon, and if you want to know what I'm reading for that readathon, I'll leave the link to my video up above and down below. But for now, onto the reviews. The first book I finished in February was the audiobook I was listening to, and that was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I gave this 4 stars, I really enjoyed it. The Poet X is a young adult contemporary novel in verse about Xiomara, who lives with her parents and her twin brother in Harlem, and she struggles to kind of be able to be her own person because ever since she developed curves, all people see is her body, and that includes her mother, who really wants her to be a good girl who obeys the laws of the church, and because Xiomara looks a certain way, her mother feels that she might be a certain kind of girl. And Xiomara feels a lot of frustration at her situation and at how her mother treats her, and she pours all of that frustration and her passion into her poetry. And even more so when she catches feeling for a boy in her school, Aman, and she starts sort of seeing him behind her parents' back, because if they would know that she was seeing a boy, all hell would break loose. She also really struggles with what the church means for her, because for her mother it's the most important thing in life, but Xiomara feels very differently. And that's basically what this novel is about. It's all about her poetry as well. The novel is written in verse, but I believe that her actual poems that she writes are also interspersed there, but because I was listening to the audiobook, that wasn't always very clear. I did really like experiencing this novel as an audiobook, because I always prefer reading novels in verse as audio, because usually these books are also narrated by the author, as was the case for this book as well, and that way you really get a sense of what the author meant when they wrote it, which is especially important for poetry, I think. I'm not always very good at reading poetry, and if the author really guides you through it with the cadence and the pacing and the emphasis, then it becomes a very immersive and wonderful experience, I think. Having said that, I sometimes did wish that I did have the written book in front of me so I could read along a bit and see how it was written down, but overall I do think I prefer the audiobook way. I really like diving into Xiomara as a main character because it is all narrated by her and you really are in her mindset. You really get a great sense of who she is and of her struggles, which I really enjoyed. But that also meant, for this novel at least, that we didn't get a lot of depth to the side characters. I would have liked to have known a bit more about her twin brother, about her friend Caridad, about her love interest Aman, because we know so little about him and he really doesn't have that much of a personality apart from the music that he likes. I didn't really care about the romance. I wasn't really rooting for them. I was rooting for Xiomara to be the person she wants to be, but whether or not the romance worked out really didn't matter to me. I also just thought that Xiomara's mother was a horrible person. I got where she was coming from. I think the novel explained that very well. She was a very pious woman. She had her children late in life when she didn't think she would be able to have children, and that put certain expectations on them. But she just treated Xiomara very horribly, and it was very difficult seeing that, or reading that, or listening to that. But I think that also caused me to be more immersed in the story. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. This was the second book by Elizabeth Acevedo that I read. I also read With the Fire on High, I think 2 years ago, or last year, I'm not sure. And I enjoyed that one as well, but I think I enjoyed this one a little bit more. She also has one more book out, Clap When You Land, and that one has gotten great reviews as well, so hopefully I'll get to that one soon too. The second book I finished in February is also the book that caused me to only read 3 books, which is not a lot for me, and it was also my main focus for the month, and that was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which is a huge book. This is an epic fantasy novel that's very popular here on BookTube. It is also the first book by Samantha Shannon that I have read, but I really want to dive into her other work as well, because she's also writing the Bone Season series. I think that will be a 7-book series in the end, and she wrote this one in between. This huge beast. I find it very difficult to summarize fantasy novels properly without giving spoilers, so I'm just going to read the summary of the book in the front of the book for you. The House of Berthnet has ruled Innis for 1,000 years. Still unwed, Queen Sabran IX must conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction, but assassins are getting closer to her door. Aide Dorian is an outsider at court. Though she has risen to the position of lady-in-waiting, she is loyal to a hidden society of mages. Aid keeps a watchful eye on Sabrin, secretly protecting her with forbidden magic. Across the dark sea, Tanae has trained to be a dragon rider since she was a child, but is forced to make a choice that could see her life unravel. Meanwhile, the divided East and West refuse to parley, and forces of chaos are rising from their sleep. So that's basically a very vague summary of the book, but it does explain the starting off point of this novel quite well. This novel is told through 4 perspectives, 2 of which were mentioned in the summary at the front of the book and 2 of which weren't. I enjoyed all of them pretty much equally because they were very different characters, and through their travels and through their adventures you get to see different parts of this world, which also brings me to my favorite part of this book, which was the world building. I think the world of the Priory of the Orange Tree is absolutely amazing and I loved immersing myself in it. I always have a bit of a slow start when I start reading a new fantasy novel because it's a new world with new customs, new cultures, and I always take my time getting to know it. I'm always a bit afraid of missing out on stuff that will become important later on, so I read it quite slowly. But for this book that was great because I loved getting to know the different cultures, the different parts of the world, the different religions, because religion plays a large role in this book. It is explored very interestingly in this novel, I think. I also enjoyed all the folklore and all the history that this book gives you about this world, and all of that was already quite outstanding to me, but what made this book stand out even more in terms of fantasy to me is the lack of homophobia and sexism. You usually see in fantasy novels that the stories fall back onto a medieval society, so women are lesser than men, they have fewer rights, they are treated awfully. Homosexuality is definitely illegal in a lot of books, and I always wonder why stories that can do anything they want fall back on that principle. When you're writing a fantasy novel, like I said, you can do anything you want because it's fantasy. You don't have to stick to certain rules. You can conceive of a society that's exactly how you want it to be. And then we usually get to see the Middle Ages with a bit of magic all over again. That was definitely different in this book because, like I said, there's no homophobia. People do definitely get married in this book, but it doesn't talk about husbands or wives. It talks about companions, and a companion can be of either gender. Men can marry men, women can marry women, as long as they're both of the same class. So there's definitely a struggle there, but there's no homophobia. And that was so refreshing to see in a fantasy novel. And the same goes for sexism, because there are plenty of women in high positions and warrior-like positions. And I noticed my inherent sexism when I read this, because every time I read about a ruler whose pronouns aren't mentioned yet, in my head it was immediately a he. And then I was always surprised when it turned out to be a she. And I'm not sure if that's my inherent sexism or if that's just my expectations of novels, of fantasy novels, but it was definitely fun for them to be subverted that way. Having said all that, my interest in the novel definitely waned a bit after the first half, because the first half was all about the political intrigue and getting to know the characters and the world, which is what I loved most about the book. And the second half of the book was way more about the plot. And I didn't think the plot was its strongest point. While the world felt extraordinary, the plot felt a bit more middle of the road fantasy to me. It reminded me a bit of The Lord of the Rings, because there was this big bad evil that needed to be vanquished, and I'm usually just not very interested in having to vanquish the big bad evil. I am much more interested in a more complex villain, a more complex problem than that. I did still really enjoy this because I love the characters and I still love the world, but I also thought the plot was a bit too convenient at times. Problems were solved rather easily, problems that seemed to be very difficult, and at times it felt very clear that characters were moving to certain places because they were needed there for the plot to evolve, and that kind of took me out of the story a little bit. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed this. I still gave it 4 stars because, like I said, the world is amazing, I loved the characters, and this was really quite a refreshing fantasy novel to read. And by the way, I forgot to say that this also fit with the buzzword challenge for this month. I'm participating in the buzzword reading challenge all year, so that means that every month there's a certain buzzword and you then need to read a book with that buzzword in the title. And for this month there wasn't one buzzword, there just needed to be a color in the title, so I read The Priory of the Orange Tree. Which leads us to the final book I finished in February, which also fit very well with the buzzword challenge, even though I didn't realize that when I started reading this, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue. I wasn't planning on reading this, but then I found out that it was on sale in the Kindle store, and this really has been on my TBR for a very long time because everybody seems to love this. So I decided to pick it up alongside The Priory of the Orange Tree for a bit of more light reading, a bit more accessible reading, because fantasy does need more of my focus and this is a contemporary novel. It's a new adult hate to love romance novel. about Prince Henry, who is a British prince, and Alex, who is the first son of the United States. He is the son of the first female president. So this is kind of an alternate history. Alex's mother was elected in the 2016 elections, so we all know how those went. This is a bit of a more hopeful and cheerful alternate history. And I gave this novel 4 stars as well. 4 stars all around this month, because I thought it was cute, it was heartwarming, it was hilarious, and I just had a really good time reading it. I don't have that many deep thoughts about the book, I just enjoyed it a lot. I thought Alex was a great narrator. I was expecting this to be a dual narrative, so Alex telling half the story and Henry telling half the story. So I was a bit surprised when the entire story was told through Alex's perspective, but I didn't mind because he was a very interesting character. I loved Alex and Henry, but I adored the side characters, June, Nora, Bea and Pez. They're Alex and Henry's friends. The writing was really good as well. It usually takes me a while to get into a new story, but with this I was just drawn in immediately. I was laughing out loud quite frequently because it was just very funny, because the dialogues were very natural and organic and witty, but on the other hand more complex emotions were conveyed very well as well. So it was just a very good experience all around. It also deals with homophobia and the press and what such a high profile homosexual relationship means for the world, which I thought was very well done. And that's it for all the books I read in February. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below what books you've read in February. What was the best book you read in February or the worst book? Did you read any of the books I mentioned today? And what did you think of them? Let's chat in the comments. I love it when people leave comments and we can chat about the books we read. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos in the future. And have a wonderful day. Bye!